Welcome to Divorce to Dynamite. I'm Michelle O'Neill. I want to start by telling you the story of my mother and how my mother basically inspired this whole idea and really inspired my whole mission. When I was about 10 years old, my dad wanted to have this very serious discussion with me, and he told me, "Michelle, I want you to come sit here on the ottoman in front of my chair and I want to talk to you." And my dad was a very serious guy anyway. So I was probably watching a show or doing something that I didn't really want to stop doing, but he wanted to have this talk. So I went and sat down on the ottoman, and he starts telling me about how he has this plan for me. And he wanted to tell me the story of my mother. Now, my mother wasn't there. She had gone shopping or something. She wasn't at home at that point in time. And I had never heard this story. Frankly, I don't think at the moment I even had the ability to appreciate the story. And it wasn't until many, many years later that my mother even told me the story. And it wasn't until way long after that that I appreciated the story fully. What he told me was that before he and my mother got married, my mother had been married to someone else. She came from a background of a very large family, a very poor family, and a family that was abusive. My mother was abused as a child, abused by her brothers, and basically found the first man that would marry her that would get her out of the house. Unfortunately, the man that she found to marry her was very much like her brothers, very much like her family of origin, and he helped her escape from the home, but really didn't help her escape from the abuse. The man she married was a drunk. He was mostly a good-for-nothing guy. He didn't really work. He didn't really have a job. He would go to whatever job of the day. He would then go to a bar and get drunk. He would come home and beat her. She had, I don't know how many miscarriages, because she would get pregnant and then he would beat her and she would miscarry. She also had to work. She kept the house. She had to cook. And when she didn't do any of those things right, including provide money for him to go drink and to run around on her, then he would continue the abuse. And finally, the abuse got so bad that she understood to the core of her being that either she was going to die in that marriage or she was going to have to leave him. And understand, ladies, that this was in the 1960s. And I get it that that's a long time ago, and many of us weren't alive in the 1960s. Many of us don't understand what the 1960s felt like for women. In the 1960s, women couldn't have a credit card in their name. I don't care that you had a job. I don't care that you got a paycheck. Your paycheck went in your husband's bank account, and he decided how to use that paycheck, because women couldn't even have their own bank account and have their own money. In the 1960s, if you were in an abusive marriage and you wanted out, your choice was to stay in the marriage or a divorce. You didn't have a choice of a property division, of alimony, of any of the things that divorces provide for you today. Those things came later as women's rights came about. My mother had to choose between life and death in a divorce. And that is the story that my father wanted me to understand at 10 years old. He wanted me to understand the desperation and the dependence that my mother felt in that situation where she was faced with life or death, life in an abusive, financially dependent, physically dependent relationship that frankly was going to be certain death, or escape, where she literally had to leave one day in the middle of the day when he was at work with the things she could carry in her hands and hide from him so that he couldn't find her. Her family wouldn't help her leave. Her brothers wouldn't help her leave. Her brothers wouldn't defend her against him. She had nobody but one girlfriend who helped her hide from this man so that she could leave. And my dad, in his wisdom, concluded that the one thing that would help me not become a woman in the desperation that my mother was in was to have education and a career. The thing that my father wanted to impart to me in that moment, besides the story of my mother, was that he wanted me so badly to understand the importance of the independence of a woman. Now, at 10 years old, I so much wanted to finish this very serious discussion and get back to whatever it was I was doing at that moment. I think I was probably watching TV, and I didn't really understand it. But somehow that story imprinted, maybe not in my consciousness, maybe not even really in my direct subconsciousness, but it imprinted in my soul that I needed to become an independent woman and that I needed to make it my mission to help other women become independent women. Thankfully, my mother had the strength of character and the strength of spirit, and even to her dying day, she was one of the strongest women I have ever met in my life. She was one of the absolute strongest women who stood up for her beliefs, whatever those were in any given minute. And I have plenty of stories about her beliefs and things she stood up with over her lifetime. Some of them are funny and some of them are very serious. But she was able to get out of that very abusive marriage. And I know that there are many of you who have similar experiences and have had to make those very serious choices. Shortly after my mother escaped from that marriage, she met my father, and she fell in love with my father because of his peaceful nature and his stability. And she knew that she would have a life with my father that was so opposite of the life with that man she married. Like I said, my mother didn't tell me about these experiences until much, much later. And I really didn't appreciate the importance of her story and the effect that it would have on my life's mission and my life's work until much, much later. But the effect that it has had on me is that I was able to get my college education, and I became a divorce lawyer so that I could help other people, not just women, men too, that wanted to make changes in their life so that they could have a better situation. The thing that my dad imparted on me the most in that moment was that he never wanted me as a woman, as a young woman, as a growing up woman, to be dependent on a man. And he said words to me that later would come back and ring in my ears. He said, Michelle, never let the man be your plan. You need another plan. You need your own plan. And that is the mission of why I am bringing this Divorce to Dynamite community to women everywhere. In 1974, women all over America fought in this country to get Congress to pass an act that allowed women to have credit cards, that allowed women to have their own bank accounts. Think about the freedom that that gave women. It was about that same time that Congress passed a law that allowed women to make the independent medical decision to take birth control without the consent of their husband. Think about the freedom that that gave women. It wasn't until 1988 that Congress passed a law that allowed women to own their own business without the consent of a man, either their husband, their brother, or their father, or even their son. 1988. Now, some of you young women may think that that was a long time ago, but I'm here to tell you that was not that long ago. And what an influence that has had on so many women now. Because now, just since 1988, we don't, as women, just have to be employed by a company run by a man. We can start our own business. We can be independent, even to the point of owning our own business. What a great thing that is. I, in my career, have represented so many women. I've represented so many people, not just women, men too. I've represented children, but especially the women. The women I find so often get in this position where they have to make these choices, and they're hard choices, right? They're such hard choices. I represented a lady named Martha. And I remember Martha. She had been married a very long time. She was in her 60s and suddenly found out, I'm not sure the facts were sudden, but suddenly Martha found out that her husband was having an affair with his secretary. Now, think about how often that happens. We understand this. But unfortunately for Martha, her husband had spent their retirement on traveling with the secretary, taking the secretary with him on business trips and places. And Martha found that all they had in the world was their house. Their children were grown, they had grandchildren, but they had no retirement, they had no money, they had no cash, they had no savings. The house she lived in that was paid for was all they had. And if she wanted a divorce, the house would get sold and split between the two of them. He had a job and a good job, but that was all she would get. And in the state of Texas, unfortunately, alimony is a very difficult thing to get. So Martha had to make a choice between her home and the fidelity of her marriage. Those are tough choices. I represented a woman named Rachel, and Rachel was in an abusive marriage. The good news for Rachel was that her husband seemed to be a good provider. They lived in a very nice house in a very good neighborhood. Her children had a very good school that they went to. She had help around the house, but her husband had a gambling addiction and was somewhat mentally abusive. Rachel wanted a divorce, and Rachel had to choose between a lifestyle versus financial control and emotional abuse. Those are hard choices. Women every day have to make hard choices in their relationships. They have to make hard choices between getting a divorce and choosing the lifestyle, the things that they have to give up in order to choose that divorce versus staying in an imperfect and sometimes extraordinarily imperfect marriage. I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I want to tell you some statistics. One statistic that I find very interesting is that the average length of a marriage in America is 8 years, just 8 years. Another statistic, having friends who are divorced raises your likelihood of divorce by 75%. Now, that statistic, on the one hand, you could say, well, hanging out with people that get divorced, then you just want to get a divorce. Or you could say that maybe being around people who are divorced empowers you, gives you the confidence that you can make it on your own. Another statistic, and this one is terrifying for many women. A woman's household income falls by 41% after divorce. And that is nearly twice the drop that men experience. A woman's household income falls by 41%. And here is the more troubling. For women over 50 who get divorced, that statistic is more like 50%. You lose 50% of your household income if you are over 50 and get a divorce as a woman. Now, this is a very troubling statistic. More than 1 in 3, 1/3 of families headed by unmarried mothers live under the poverty line. Unmarried mothers, 1/3 of unmarried mothers live under the poverty line. So for every mother that is listening to this podcast that is not married, 1 in 3 is under the poverty line. That is astounding. And you know what that statistic doesn't track? The mothers who are struggling. The poverty line is so far down there that doesn't track the ones who are struggling. For women over 50, that statistic doubles. 2 out of 3 divorced women over 50 live in poverty. The divorce rate for people in their 50s has doubled since the 90s. The divorce rate for people in their 60s has tripled. And again, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe women feel empowered to get divorced now because there are more people like them getting divorced. But there's also choices that they're making because the divorce has negative consequences on their financial independence. In 2004, this year, 1/3 of all divorces will involve people over 50. And for women, the likelihood that a woman over 50 who gets divorced, the likelihood that she will find someone else to be with, they call it recoupling. The likelihood that a divorced woman over 50 will recouple is 22%. 80% of divorced women over 50 will not find another partner. What that says is, ladies, that we have to learn to be independent. And we can do this. Ladies, we have raised children. We carry the weight of the world on our backs. When we are married, we work, we cook, we clean, we raise the kids, we get them to soccer practice. We do all of these things. But as divorced women, we have to do them for ourselves. I feel like I'm about to break out in song. I'm not going to, I promise. Singing is not my strong suit. But you know, when you get a divorce, women can get stuck. You can get stuck because you get stuck looking in the rearview mirror. And you know, the rearview mirror in your car is small for a reason. Because you need to take a little bitty look in the rearview mirror. The front-facing window of your car is big because that's the direction we need to be looking. You need to look forward. So after your divorce, I have 3 things that I want you to focus on to go from divorced to dynamite. First, I want you to focus on you. And this is where I want you to be like Rocky, all right? Rocky says, you, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much can you take and keep moving forward? That is how winning is done. Ladies, we can win at this after divorce thing. We can go from being divorced to being dynamite. And you know what? There is nothing about it that is as great as success feels when you see that ex. So be like Rocky. Prepare for that next phase. Prepare for that next time that you run into your ex. What does that mean? That means you have to get your mindset right. You have to focus on the positive. You have to focus on yourself. Get right with your doctors. Get right with your physical health. You have to rebuild yourself from the ground up, mentally, physically, spiritually. Find new interests. Find your personal, physical development. Rebuild yourself from your ground up. You know, somebody told me, so you always hear this. You hear people say, focus on the positive. And I always thought I was a positive thinker. But then one day somebody gave me the trick to being a positive thinker. And I'm going to share with you the trick to being the positive thinker that was shared with me because I found out I wasn't a positive thinker. That trick is called Tony the Tiger. You know Tony the Tiger. Some of y'all are too young to know Tony the Tiger, but Tony the Tiger on the Kellogg's Frosted Flakes box. In the commercial, he would say, great. That is the trick to positive thinking. I don't care what life throws at you. I don't care what somebody says to you. If somebody walks up to you at the gas station and says, my God, your butt got big, I want you to turn around to them and say, great, thanks. Positive thinking. That's it. That's the key. Whatever life throws at you, you turn around and say, great. And then you do you. Second key to becoming divorced to dynamite. Create a new community. Leave behind the relationships that no longer serve you. Activate your network. Figure out who you know and who they know that can propel you forward to your new life. What does your new life look like? What are your new interests? Meet new people. Find new hobbies. You know, what is the thing that you always wanted to do? I find that for many people in a relationship, especially women, we lose ourselves. we are so focused on the things that the couple like to do together that we forget about what we like to do ourselves. Yes, we together like to do X, Y, or Z, but I myself really like to do this other thing that he didn't like to do. So go do that thing. And remember the difference between being alone versus being lonely. Being alone is liberating. It's where you find yourself. It's where you remember to introduce yourself to you. Being lonely is a temporary emotional state. And it's sad. And I understand you're going to be sad at times. And you've got to pass through that and focus on the positive. I want to caution you, though. Don't move on too quickly. Don't move on to a new relationship until you find yourself first. Meet yourself first and get to know yourself first before you move into that new relationship. Because if you don't, you risk making the same mistakes again. That statistic I told you about the unlikelihood of divorced women to find another partner, this is why your girlfriends in your network are going to be so important. The third step in going from divorce to dynamite is to kickstart your opportunities. Those statistics I told you about the poverty level of women after divorce, those statistics don't even talk about the struggle bus that so many women are on. And the only way out of poverty, the only way off the struggle bus, do you think the men are going to help us get off the struggle bus? Maybe some of them will, but for the most part they won't. So you have to find your own direction. Enhance your skills so you can get a promotion and get a raise. Find new skills so you can get a side hustle. You know, the gig economy now, you can get on Fiverr or some of those types of websites and have some extra cash coming in. Find skills that you can do that other moms or other women in your network need done, and do them so that you can have some extra cash. Consider entrepreneurship. Remember, I told you it was only in 1988 that women could own their own business. And now in 2004, 43% of all businesses in America are owned by women. Ladies, let's make that 50% in 10 years. Entrepreneurship is the way out of dependence on men. And in real estate, did you know that 65% of all realtors in America are women? Real estate is entrepreneurship. That is a great way out of that struggle bus. Marilyn Monroe said, "Some women choose to follow men. Some women choose to follow their dreams." If you're wondering which way to go, remember that your career will never wake up and tell you it doesn't love you anymore. Ladies, I created this Divorce to Dynamite community, this Divorce to Dynamite podcast, as a way for women after the divorce to know they're not alone, to know that there is a path out of the ditch that they feel they're in, out of the loneliness they feel they're in, to greatness, to know that there is a place that they can connect with other women that are like them, where they can go from divorced to dynamite, where they can find the girlfriends. Do you know loneliness is one of the biggest epidemics in our country today? And women who are divorced are suffering from that. They feel so alone. They have so many things on their plate, their children, their job, paying the bills, all the things they're struggling with. And they need their girlfriends. And ladies, we need to be here for them. And my Divorce to Dynamite community is created to bring all of us together, to share our experiences and pull each other up in a positive, uplifting, and empowering way. If you want to join my Divorce to Dynamite community, completely free, it's a Facebook group. All you have to do is join. Go to my website, michellemayoneill.com. Follow the link to the Facebook group. Follow this podcast. I'm going to bring great guests to you that I hope you will benefit from, learn from, and be educated by. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here. And please continue to follow me and share this with all of your girlfriends.